Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of the Monsters Den. We've got in the co-captain's chairs tonight, returning once again to Sea of Tranquility, Mr. Mike Portnoy from Winery Dogs, Sons of Apollo, Dream Theater, Neil Morse Band, or NMB, Flying Colors, so many other, so on and so forth. We got Jamie Laszlo in the house, and we got Dan Brown in the house from the warehouse in Newburgh, New York. So tonight's topic is all about Brian De Palma. So if you guys watched our epic Alfred Hitchcock show from a couple of weeks ago, Mr. De Palma has often been tagged with kind of like a guy who really worshipped Hitchcock's films and has been said to have done quite a few films that have been in the kind of homage, so to speak, to the great Hitchcock. But he's done all sorts of different genres. As we were talking off camera before, he's done thrillers and semi-horror films and war films and all sorts of crazy comedies and things like that. So I've asked everybody to go deep through 30-odd films that he has directed. And I've asked everybody to pick out their 5 favorite De Palma films, ranked from 5 to 1. We'll probably hit on a couple of honorable mentions at the end. So as we were all talking, this was not easy because a lot of really great films. So it'll be interesting to see what everybody's come up with. So I'm going to have Mike kick us off with his number 5.
So just so I know the format, so am I just doing one at a time we go around?
Okay. Yep, one at a time. Yep.
Well, you can't talk about Brian De Palma without talking about Hitchcock first, like you mentioned. I don't think there's ever been a director that's been so derivative. Well, derivative is maybe not the right term. That's almost an insult, but so influenced by another director. And so many films in the De Palma body of work here is so Hitchcock. I mean, you could really see Vertigo, Rear Window, Psycho. You could see all those films in here. And even I remember his nickname, Hitchcock was the master of suspense. I remember Brian De Palma. I don't know if somebody else coined him this or he coined himself this, but he was called the master of the macabre. And so even his nickname was, was influenced by Hitch. And there was a time where they both coexist because, when De Palma started making films in the late 60s, early 70s, Hitchcock was still doing it too. In fact, Sisters and Frenzy both came out, I think, in 73. And Frenzy was like one of Hitchcock's most graphic films, I think, in his entire filmography. So it's interesting that there were a couple of years where they were coexisting and, they were both making films at the same time. But onto the list here. So coincidentally, this wasn't by design, but coincidentally, my list goes chronological, pretty much with the exception of one. So walking through my list, it's almost like you could see his development, and that wasn't on purpose. But my number 5 is what I just mentioned, 1973's Sisters. The light is blurring it out, but there you go. And this is the Criterion version. And this was, I guess, De Palma's first real step into Hitchcock land, because he started with Greetings and Hi Mom, both of which were with like De Palma's, De Niro's first films, but they were more like social political comedies, and very, very, strangely shot, very psychedelic, very late 60s. So Sisters was his first time to really spread his Hitchcock wings. And once I went down the De Palma rabbit hole, I guess I discovered De Palma probably in the 70s, late 70s or early 80s. And went backwards. And when I saw this, it blew my mind because it was the first time I had seen the use of a split screen as much as it's utilized here. Yeah. And he went on to use split screen in all his films. It's in Carrie, it's in Snake Eyes, it's in Scarface. He went on to use it, Body Double. He Dressed to Kill. It became like one of his staples. But Sisters was the first time I had ever seen it used so predominantly. And there's one sequence in there, especially where Charles Durning is looking through the apartment across the building, of course, shades of Rear Window. But you have his perspective, and then you had 2 different perspectives going up into Margaret Kidder's apartment. So you see it from inside the apartment and then from outside the apartment where Jennifer Salt is walking up. And it fascinated me. When I first saw that sequence, I was like, how the fuck did this guy do this? And now, of course, you see it all the time. In fact, Gaspar Noé's upcoming film, Vortex is shot entirely in split screen. That's coming out later this year or next year. So, but so now everybody does it. But this was the first time I had seen it, and there's so many technical moments in this that were like taking Hitchcock to the next level. And Hitchcock was always such a visual innovator. The shot. You study Rope, you study Psycho, you study all of Hitchcock's films, and you could tell that De Palma studied Hitchcock's films inside and out and was taking the groundwork that Hitch laid out and then taking it to a new level with new tricks. And so many of his films have that. But Sisters is my number 5. I love it. It was been remade recently a couple of years ago. Not nearly as good, but this is the original. This is the Criterion version, and there's a lot of Criterions. They've been doing a lot of the De Palma stuff. They did Dress to Kill and Blowout, so they've been on board with a lot of these reissues. And I think this has interviews and audio discussions. So yeah, but that's my number 5, Sisters.
Great choice.
You know what I find interesting about that movie that I noticed when I watched it recently? There is a scene where not Kidder, but the other woman.
Jennifer Saul.
Yeah, she's taking a cake out of a refrigerator. And of course, you see her from the refrigerator's point of view. And, whenever they do that, they cut out a hole in the back of the refrigerator. But you actually see the hole in the movie because the camera pans back and goes to the left. And you're like, oh, look, there's the hole. It almost takes you out of it for a second, but it's kind of cool at the same time.
There's a lot of stuff in Sisters too that reminds me of Polanski's Repulsion. I don't know if you guys know Repulsion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great.
But very, very similar. Like not taking your medication and her going psychotic, and and also the backstory is very interesting. It's interesting when they show the old film footage of the two sisters being separated. Remind me of some stuff that they did on Lost years ago with the Dharma Initiative. Had a little bit of that kind of vibe to it as well.
Yeah, well, he based the script. He based the script on an actual incident with Siamese twins.
Wow.
A Russian couple, and that's what he was inspired by. It's so funny. There were one thing that for some reason, and it had nothing to do with influence or whatever, but as I was watching that film, in the back of my mind, a voice was saying, as many times in my day, but it was saying David Cronenberg. It just reminds me of a Cronenberg film, just that creepy. Not that Cronenberg was not even in the game at this point, but it just screams like a David Cronenberg weirdness about it. And to add to Jamie's point, and something that De Palma, I think, does in all of his films, is that he has a thin line of reality and fantasy within the film. What is real and what is not real? For example, the icebox is an interesting situation. Icebox, my age, refrigerator, where it kind of backs out and goes away. So it's fake, but it's part of the storytelling. He does it with murals. He does it with a lot of things. What separates reality and fantasy? But sorry, I just wanted to say that while we were on a roll.
And I mentioned Frenzy earlier because it was made the same year. Even I haven't seen Frenzy in a long time, but even the disposal of the bodies, like I assume people that watch this, you can handle spoiler alerts, right? You can't tiptoe around talking about the movies. Right. There you go. But the way that the body is disposed of in Sisters remind me, and then suddenly the couch gets driven away on a truck or whatever, reminds me of a lot of the touches that Hitchcock had in Frenzy as well.
Yeah. And what's great about it, I think, for Sisters, if you've never seen the film before, really until the very end, you're still kind of wondering what the deal is with the two sisters, right? And then at the end, it becomes clearly obvious. But and I think that goes down to a great performance by Margot Kidder, who also I don't think has ever looked lovelier than in that film. But it's a great job. Really good cast in the film. And you start to see all the De Palma regulars starting to show up right from in that film and going on, which I'm sure we'll hit on today. So
the cop from Give Me a Break's in it.
Dolph Sweet.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Yep. All right, cool. Jamie with his cool Team B shirt on. What do you got?
We are Team B.
That's right. There you go.
Dan, yours is in the mail.
Oh, thank you.
But you know what? I made this like 2 weeks ago when Pete was saying we got Team B coming up. So I'm going to make a t-shirt that says Team B.
I thought it was Team Brian. I thought it was for Brian, no?
No, we're just Team B. But since
He
we
sticks
got you,
letters on
Mike,
and off every week.
since we got you, Mike, in the mix,
Team M.
really 18 today.
Woo! There you go.
That's right. Just for one day, we're the 18.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm gonna wear it the whole time. All right, my number 5 might surprise you guys. I don't know. I'm going with Casualties of War.
Ooh.
Now, this is kind of like, do you remember, Pete, when you counted down the Dio albums?
Yep.
You put Sacred Heart a little bit higher than maybe it should be because you had a warm spot for it when you were a kid and you still got that warm spot. Maybe it hasn't aged quite as good, but you still have that warm spot. That's how I am with this. This is the Sacred Heart of Brian De Palma movies because I loved it when I was 18. As disturbing as it is,
And it is.
I loved it. For anyone out there who doesn't know, it's during the Vietnam War. A soldier finds himself on the outside of his own squad as they kidnap this girl from the village, and they basically just use her as a sex slave. As they trek through the jungle and take breaks, they use her. So this is the Monsters Den, but I do believe that monsters come in all shapes and sizes, and I would say Sean Penn in this movie is a bona fide monster. He actually never talked to Michael J. Fox on the set. And there's a scene towards the end where Michael J. Fox has to get angry and hit a guy with a shovel. You know, Michael J. Fox has that nice persona about him, especially in the 80s. And he could not get to that angry place. And I watched the De Palma documentary recently, where it's just Brian De Palma talking in a chair the whole time. There's no narration, there's no input from other people. There's film clips, but it's just De Palma talking about himself. It's still interesting. And he said that during the shovel scene, Sean Penn got up and shoved Michael J. Fox to the floor or to the ground just to get him angry. And he got up and did the scene. And then what I find is great in such a, you know, because Sean Penn was a bit of a dick in the 80s, you know, if you remember the tabloids. So at the end, mute me if you don't want to hear. At the end, when they're all convicted of rape, and Michael J. Fox is sitting there in the courtroom, and they all walk past him, Sean Penn whispers something into Michael J. Fox's ear. And you as a viewer cannot hear what he says, but you see the facial expression of Michael J. Fox. And I did not know what he said until I watched the De Palma documentary. And according to him, Sean Penn whispered into his ear, remember this is 1989, TV actor. How great is that? That almost made this movie shoot to my number 1.
See, but he had already done Back to the Future, so he had bigger numbers than Sean Penn at that. You know, Back to the Future versus Fast Times. Come on.
Yeah, I know. But maybe he thought that was just a whim. Okay, that was
right.
Not Back to Family Ties, boy.
Yeah.
But it really asked the question, though. I think the true meaning, De Palma says it was a metaphor for what we do to countries when we go to war. We rape them. But to me, it really asks the question, how long do you need to be in war before you start, how long does it take before you stop seeing human beings as human beings? You know, because even John C. Reilly's defense at the end, they ask him, why didn't Michael J. Fox's character, whatever his name is, why didn't he partake, you think? He goes, well, he was new. I was there like 3 weeks before him. So he's basically saying, yeah, so I war does that to you. 3 more weeks of war and you start raping girls. What can I say?
Yeah.
Awful.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's my number 5, Casualties of War.
That just came on a couple nights ago. I was laying in bed at 3 a.m. and it came on. And of course, once it's on, you can't turn it off.
Right.
And De Palma kind of remade almost the same exact themes with Redacted many years later with the Iraq War. So yeah. He really is kind of touched on that theme with 2 different films of his.
Yeah, underrated film. I quite enjoy that a lot. Out of a lot, you know, there's so many good like Vietnam films. That's always been one of my favorites.
It's a powerful scene when she's walking down the train tracks, bloody and stabbed. I don't know why they scream she's getting away. You just tried killing her. And where is she going? Yeah. Getting away to where? doesn't make 100% sense, but it's still a powerful image of her walking down.
Yeah. Yep. Good choice. All right, Dan, what do you got for number 5?
I'm in with Mike right now. I'm going to go with Sisters, and De Palma has always had a rather dicey relationship with the studio system. He doesn't like to take orders too well. He likes to do things his own because he's his own visionary. But he came back to New York, the East Coast, after a short stint in Hollywood. Nothing came of it, and he came back a little disenfranchised, and he went to work on Sisters, which, it has all these elements going for it. I mean, it takes place in the garden spot of the of New York Borough, Staten Island, which is very weird, this offbeat location. Charles Durning, who runs a window washing business, who reminds us that he graduated from the New York School of Detective Engineering, because he thinks he's a PI. And then it goes along and it's got some creepy elements, but the best part of that film, aside from Margot Kidder, is William Finley, who plays her doctor, who was a longtime friend of De Palma. They met each other at Sarah Lawrence College in the film department. And William Finley eventually played the Phantom of the Paradise. He played this Dr. Elmo, or whatever his name was. He also appears in the film The Black Dahlia as a killer. And
right.
He looks the same, like he hasn't aged.
He's just creepy. And I think, I guess why I mentioned earlier about when I watch Sisters, I think it's like Cronenberg. He reminds me of David Cronenberg's character in Nightbreed, where he played the psychopathic doctor. Maybe that's what triggered it with me. But the great thing about Sisters, it moves along. You've got the body situation, the homage from Hitchcock, the introduction of the split screen. But all of a sudden it's weird. And then as soon as Jennifer Salt ending up in the sanitarium, not by her own choice, it just takes this like jump off the tracks and gets weird with that black and white footage and the creepy doctors. I believe that De Palma was probably influenced with that footage with the flashlight or the light on it of the Willowbrook expose that what's his name, Geraldo Rivera did in 1969 or 70 when he went out to Willowbrook, which is an insane asylum, and he wanted to show the conditions in which these people were living in, and they had to sneak in. And he had nothing more than a small camera with like a very tiny film camera light on it. So it had this really weird, sinister. I have a funny feeling he probably was influenced by that. But the film goes along really well. The one thing I just don't seem to understand, yes, spoiler alert, the body is in a couch. Number one, the couch is so heavy. Now, after a few days, wouldn't he start getting a little ripe and a little seepage, coming out of that thing? But it
depends whose couch it was. You never know.
And then again, if it was a Sealy Posturepedic, or what was that? What was the one? The old Castro convertibles. They were pretty good. They absorbed a lot of moisture. But it's and then once again, spoiler alert, since it's hard to explain De Palma, he always has these really shocking endings, where something happens, like as in Carrie and a few things. I thought the ending of Sisters was a very much out of a left field, like, oh shit, and made me laugh that somebody is still on the case and there's the couch. Yeah. And it just said, this will be continued. I found that so amusingly wow watching that. So, but Sisters is a great middle effort. It strikes me as a grindhouse film on a large scale budget, and he pulls it off effectively. And it did get great reviews. It's always been revered as a very, very well done film. Yep. Although he got lambasted years later for other things. That's it, Sisters.
Cool. All right, my number 5. Number 5 was a hard choice for me. I had like 3 that I was like that were jockeying for position here, but you got to make a decision, right? So I went with 1984's Body Double, which I like a lot. Again, this may be one of his most obvious homages to Hitchcock. There's elements of Rear Window and Vertigo, maybe a little bit of Dial M for Murder here. Basically, this is a story about a kind of struggling actor who does a lot of B movies and horror movies and things like that. That's the actor Craig Wasson. But of course, he has this horrible fear of tight spaces, right? He's got severe claustrophobia. So like at the beginning of the film, he's playing a vampire role in this film. And of course he freaks out a scene that's being filmed in a coffin. So that's kind of how the whole thing starts. But he gets into an argument with the director, who of course is played by the guy
Dennis
from
Franz.
What's that?
Dennis Franz.
Yeah. Who's in all these films, right? And so he winds up, he's all upset. He's like, gets into a fight. He's probably going to leave the film, whatever. And he's outside complaining to a bunch of people that he knows who are also working on the film. And this guy happens to be overhearing the whole conversation, and he talks to him, he befriends him. They go out for a drink and whatever. And, the guy tells him, well, actually, I have this good friend of mine who's got this great place. He's looking for kind of like a house sitter. If you want to make some extra bucks for a couple of weeks, maybe you can come and you can do that, just whatever. So he's like, sure. So he goes to set him up with this, and they go to the house, and it's this weird, like kind of, I don't know, spaceship like house, and, out in Los Angeles overlooking this valley or whatever. It's an amazing view. And the guy's like, oh, one of the perks that comes with the house, and he's got like a telescope. He goes, check this out. So he sets it all up for him. And there at this house down in the valley, this real ritzy, house, is this very attractive woman who I guess every night does like a little kind of strip tease in her living room in front of the open window, right? So of course, this guy every night goes and watches this woman do this strip tease. And then of course, you can kind of see where this is all going. And then of course, he sees her, he's watching her, and he sees someone try to murder her, right? So then this whole story, he gets kind of infatuated with this whole situation. He goes down to talk to the woman. He starts following her, and that's actually, it's Deborah Shelton, gorgeous Deborah Shelton. So he goes following her down to the beach, right? He sees this like weird looking Indian dude who's also watching her from close by down at the beach. The Indian's also following her. He goes to steal her handbag, her purse, and Craig Wasson's character chases after the Indian. They go into this little tunnel that connects like the beach with the main street. And of course he gets an attack of, claustrophobia right in the middle. And again, kind of images of vertigo. Here we go all over again. And then he winds up talking to the Deborah Shelton character. And long story short, she winds up getting murdered. Okay. He witnesses it. He goes to try to save her because of course he's watching her all the time. And then it starts this whole other sequence of events. Then he finds out about this porn star, and he happens to see a video of hers, and he notices that she dances exactly like the woman that he was watching through the telescope from the mansion, right? So the whole, long story short, as it turns out, someone actually paid her to go into that house each and every night to do this dance when the actual lady of the house was not around, just so he could see what was going on. So as it turns out, there's this whole scheme put together. And I think it's just a really cool kind of like, at the end, you're finally, well, who set it all up? Who's the crazy Indian? How does the porn star figure out into this whole thing? What's the deal with the white German Shepherd? All this stuff, and a really, really cool ending. A lot of people at the time and critics kind of, shot this film down because of its like depiction of women not in such a positive light and all that sort of thing. But I think once you kind of look past it all, I think this is a really ingenious film that's a lot of fun, really good camera tricks. The whole like De Palma is famous for doing that. You've got an actor or two actors together and taking the camera and going round and round and round type of thing, which he uses quite a bit in this film, specifically in the scene down by the beach, or actually in the tunnel. I think, what is it? Just outside
the tunnel. I think.
Yeah, inside the tunnel. So really good. And, I will say Melanie Griffith looks amazing in this film. And this was her big coming out film. This is what really got her onto, Working Girl and other big parts. And just really good acting all around, great cast, great score, and just an all around fun film. When we were getting ready to do this, I was not expecting this to be in my top 5. But when I rewatched it again after not seeing it for many years, I realized how much I really like this movie. So,
it's classic Rear Window meets Vertigo. And, there's a couple of De Palma trademarks in there. The opening scene with him in the coffin reminds me of like the opening of Blowout, when they're, in the opening of Blowout, they're filming like a teenage murder movie, and you don't realize you're watching a movie within a movie. This opens the same way. Yeah. Of course, the drill scene is one of the most.
I didn't even touch on that.
That's like one of the sickest De Palma murder sequences in his entire like filmography.
Yeah,
De Palma got asked.
And the Frankie Goes to Hollywood too. I think he directed the video for Frankie Goes to Hollywood. Relax, Don't Do It as well.
I think so. Yeah.
De Palma got asked, why did you have to make the drill bit so long? He said, so it would go through the floor.
Got to go through the floor, right?
Yeah.
I love the fact, to add to tension as he's coming after her with the drill at one point, the extension cord is not long enough.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Brilliant.
Oh, yeah.
Didn't the Indian think of this? No, it's classic.
Yeah. It's a good, fun film, I think. And really well done. Really well done. So that's my number 5. All right, Mike, back to you for number 4.
My number 4, and once again, it's going chronologically and not by design, just by coincidence. 1976, Carrie. This light is so bright. This is the one that really put him on the map in Hollywood. I think this was probably his first real big hit. His first time, working with such a cast. John Travolta, John Travolta only had done like Welcome Back, Kotter at this point.
Yeah, he was still in the show, yeah.
The boy in the plastic bubble, but that was maybe it. So this was really
The Devil's Rain. Let's not forget The Devil's Rain.
But obviously, it goes without saying, it's a Sissy Spacek, tour de force performance. Same with Piper Laurie, who went on to be in Twin Peaks, which is a soft spot for me. But the supporting cast, all the girls, you have Nancy Allen, you have Amy Irving, PJ Souls. These were like the classic supporting girls of that time. PJ Souls went on to do Halloween and Rock and Roll High School. This, to me, I think a lot of people who love Carrie probably love the Stephen King isms in it. They probably love the whole Piper Laurie story with the knives flying and the whole supernatural stuff. But for me, that's not what makes this film a favorite for me. For me, this is a great time capsule of 1976. This is like, you watch Dazed and Confused. That's a 1976 time capsule. Well, this is really 1976, or technically, I guess they shot it in 75, but you're really seeing the fashion, the look, the cars. You really feel like you're in a high school, in 1975, 1976. So that's the aspect of this I love. I love that I could put this on and it really takes me back to that period and time. And that look, the prom sequence has been done to death. First of all, this movie's been remade to death. I think there's like 3 or 4 remakes of it. But even like the prom sequence reminds me of, there's a prom sequence in Sofia Coppola's Virgin Suicides, which reminds me a little bit of this. And the way that the prom sequence is shot, it's typical De Palma suspense. Something that normally could probably be shown in a normal Hollywood film today within 30 seconds, De Palma milks it for a good 10 minutes. You're seeing, he'll just show, rather than just showing the bucket of blood up there, he'll just show the cord and the rope leading to it. Then he'll go up, and then he'll be along the top, and then he'll pull over and you could see the people in the dance in the background, then pull down and you'll see a couple of people underneath the stage. He has a way of taking these long tracking shots and milking the suspense. And of course, once again, he got that from Hitchcock, but I think he's taking those kind of trademarks and taking it to a whole new level. So, and then of course the ending is, one of those classic jump scares. To me, when I first saw it, it scared the crap out of me, but it also reminded me of the ending of Deliverance, with the hand coming out of the water. But this is classic. It's classic De Palma, classic 70s period piece and time capsule. And that's my number 4.
Also think too, the whole idea and, the general basis of the movie is all about like bullying and, what kids have to deal with at school. And that's still so relevant today.
I just watched, it was either an episode of American Horror Stories, or I just watched that Fear Street trilogy that was on Netflix, and they actually they set up a girl. They wanted to, you know, set her up and then humiliate her, and they called it a Carrie. They said, we're going to carry her. You know, it almost became like a pop culture, you know, adverb.
Yeah, crazy. Yep, very cool. All right, Jamie.
Oh shit, that came fast. Number 4 is going to be Blowout.
That's what she said.
She also said Blowout. I don't know. You mentioned it, parts of it. But you know what I find funny about this? That they are doing a movie. John Travolta is doing the sound effects for a movie, and it's called Bordello of Blood, which later became a movie with Dennis Miller in the 90s. And then in Body Double, they're filming Vampire's Kiss, which later became a movie with Nicolas Cage. So he was like saying movie titles before they existed.
Yep.
And I love when Travolta's walking down the hallways of the movie studio. Did you ever see the fake movie posters on the wall? They are so well done.
They are.
The names of them: The Foo Goose, Squirm, Boogeyman, The Melting Man. These sound like movies that would be in Pete's collection. Like on Friday night on Facebook, I see Pete watching Boogeyman. So I love that. Let's talk about the Hitchcock type parts of it. You mentioned the spinning that he does in a lot of movies. When Travolta when he finds out, let me just hold this up. When he finds out that all his tapes are erased in the room, the camera spins around him, and it feels like chaos, like he's losing his mind going, I can't believe it. De Palma said it was supposed to represent a real turning, and as the tape was erased. These directors, they do nothing by accident. They always have a meaning. You may not always catch it, but the meaning's there somewhere. And when the girl is strangled in the airport restroom is very Hitchcock. You see, what's his name? John Lithgow come over, and then you see her feet rise from underneath as the camera pans out. It's almost frenzy when the girl gets murdered in the apartment and the camera pans out to the street. It pans away, you just see her feet, and it goes into the regular airport. But I like seeing a young John Lithgow in here killing people, because it feels like you're watching the origin of the Trinity murder from, I don't know if you guys watch Dexter.
Yep.
But he's like a younger Trinity in this movie.
Yep.
And everyone said that he'd love to do split screens as his signature shot, but he also liked to do a face really up close with action going on in the back.
Just Citizen Kane. They got that from Wells.
Oh, yes. I see that in the movie The Innocents, and I go, Citizen Kane. But he said it was a great way to do split screen without actually doing split screen. You would see two actions at the same time in the same frame. But I like what he does in the beginning of this. He adds a twist to it. He does it with animals. When Travolta is taping, he's got his little gun out there and he's taping sounds out in the forest from a bridge. You see an owl really close and you see Travolta way in the back. And they do it with a frog and you hear the ribbit and he's taping the ribbit way in the back. It's that shit that's really cool to me. Yeah. And the end. And when I say the end, I'm talking about the last 30 seconds of this movie. I'm not going to spoil it because it is too wonderful to spoil. I love demented endings. That's why I love The Mist, the Stephen King movie, The Mist. The more demented and wrong the ending, the more I like it. And this ending is up there, man, top 10 most demented endings. It almost seems out of character for Travolta, but then it doesn't, because he wants the girl to maybe live on forever at the same time. But watch it and do not walk away until it's right to the end.
That's right. Yep. Yeah. He's actually got a lot of really good endings to some of these films, I think.
I mean, yeah. The ending of Blowout, that's what kind of damaged it for him. There were a lot of people that were turned off by that ending at the time in theaters and critics. Yeah. I think it's
those people.
I think it's genius. The
It's
most
genius.
ending you want to see.
And the
He has
build up
always
to
that.
it too. The
Yeah.
whole movie, they're looking for a certain something, and then they find it. In the
And
wrong
he goes,
way.
wow, yeah, it does work. What do you know? So yeah, I'm next. That's me.
You are.
Okay, well, with Mike, I'm neck and neck with Mike. Although Mike is going chronological and I'm going whatever direction I go, I'm going with Carrie again. I'm going with Carrie. And what I will add to Carrie in this is that we're talking about that split screen, focus in front and back. Our first introduction to William Katt's character in the classroom, where they're talking about his paper. He's in the foreground and Carrie is in the background, and they're both in focus. When there says, anybody have a comment about his poem? She goes, beautiful. That's it. But that's also in that situation. Getting back to what Peter said at one point, it's all about teenage angst. It's anxiety. I believe also the situation where, you know, everyone's going around, like where Mike said how he likes to milk the suspense, and which is true, because De Palma loves to screw with the audience. He loves to get an emotion out of the audience, whether it be tension, fear, whatever. And I find, as you're watching the film and you're seeing this poor girl who is now, you know, been brought to the prom, you know, out of somebody that cares about her at this point, or the boyfriend of somebody who feels guilty about how Carrie is treated. And you see her having this magical moment. She has no idea what's going on. You know that something's being set up just to screw with her day. I tell you, when they dropped the bucket, my heart just sank. I felt so like kind of like at the end of Blowout. It is so heart-wrenching that here's this girl that finally has it, and she's so caught up in what her zealot mother is screaming at her. And I think it's just from her standpoint, she's saying, everyone will laugh at you. And there is the gym teacher who was her only friend laughing in her vision, but I don't think that was the case. She was so full of rage of getting back at everybody. But this film, you know, it's very 70s, got soft photography throughout it. Everything looks kind of dreamlike in it, or just hazy or humid. Piper Laurie, can't say anything about her, you know. As a matter of fact, they ended up making it as a musical on Broadway, I believe. Talk about remakes. I don't know how well it did, you know. But I just like that film because it does capture high school, and it captures, if you want to look at dazing and views, who should be kind of like the fun part of getting stoned and driving 90 miles to see, like, you know, ZZ Top, or hanging around with a Matthew McConaughey, or the guy who was the local legend. This is like the anti-high school film. This is all about bullying and being nasty and puberty, and just, you know, and it makes you sit and look at the mirror and say, gee, was I that much of a prick when I was a kid? You know, you know, you surprise yourself. So it's well done. First film adaptation done of a Stephen King novel, of which Stephen King received $2,500 for the rights.
Wow.
Which equates to $13,780 in today's money. But he said the fact, and the money he's made since, but he was so excited over the fact of somebody actually wanted to buy his stuff, you know, so he thought that was like, I'm surprised he didn't frame the check. But yeah. Anything else I've got about it? I wrote down. Gee,
was it his first book as Stephen King?
It was also his first book as well. Yes, it was his first book. He wrote it in 74, and they optioned it like in 75 right away. So he was a guy that, the story goes about Stephen King, I mean, they were broke, and he literally would sit with a small typewriter on his lap because he didn't have a desk, and pound out stories to try to sell them. But, you know, overall, no, that pretty much covers it. And Mike covered a lot. I had some notes here for myself. He covered most of the things about going to PJ Souls and Nancy Allen, who eventually became Mrs. Brian De Palma.
Yeah.
You know,
Amy Irving became Mrs. Steven Spielberg, I think. Right?
And actually, she got onto the film because Spielberg and her were together, and he asked him to cast her.
And actually, speaking of the casting, did you know Carrie was cast at the same casting call as George Lucas casting Star Wars?
Yeah,
so they were sharing a lot of the cast members. Like,
some of these people came over, right?
A lot of them auditioned for Star Wars, didn't get the gig, but De Palma took them for Carrie.
John Travolta could have been Luke Skywalker.
Yeah,
could have been.
Or Carrie Fisher. Wait, Carrie Fisher should have been
Carrie
Carrie.
could have been Carrie.
Mind blown.
Carrie Fisher is Carrie.
Yeah. I don't think Sissy Spacek would have worked as Princess Leia. I don't
I
know.
don't think so.
No.
It's amazing how she was 26 and she looks like she's 15.
Yeah, yeah, she had a very young face. Yeah, I keep seeing like the final scene, and all you keep hearing is Piper Laurie. They're all gonna laugh at you. They're all gonna laugh at you over and over and over again.
He liked voiceovers, De Palma.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yep. Cool. All right, my number 4. So we talked at the top of the hour about how De Palma did a lot of different films, right? He dabbled in a lot of different genres. Well, none more so than this one, the modern day, well, actually, the historical gangster film. So I'm going to go with 1987's The Untouchables, part of this collection. There it is, right there. All sorts of cool films in this set. So this is basically the story of Al Capone's rise to underworld domination, right, in Chicago. Elliot Ness is the young up and coming, police, what was he, a police chief, or investigator, whatever the hell he was, whatever his title was. But man, what a cast in this film. So you've got, he puts together this team to go out and take down Capone. So he's got Charles Martin Smith. He's got Andy Garcia. He's got, of course, Sean Connery as Jim Malone, right? And they go out, and they're going to go out and try and bring down Capone. They're going to go try and get the accountant, right? Who's going to, they finally, after all these attempts to try and bring down Capone and bust him, smuggling this, that, and the other thing, and, all these places where he's doing his dirty business, because, of course, Capone thinks he's untouchable, played by the wonderful Robert De Niro. But, when then they find out that if they grab the accountant, they can find all the information about tax evasion, right? So, but, one by one, members of Capone, of Elliot Ness's team, get kind of taken out. And, the whole film is almost like this whole long chase film. It's like you have the battle between Capone and Ness and who's going to win this battle, right? And then you got the whole court scene in the end. I mean, there's just so many great scenes. It's a fast-paced, fun movie. The scene where they're in the train station, where there's the big gunfight in the train station and the baby carriage going down the steps. I mean, it's just absolute classic stuff. Classic De Palma. A lot of great camera work in this film. But for me, man, it's all about the acting in this film is just off the charts. And it's just, even though was made a lot of money, this won a couple of Oscars and things like that, this to me is just a great historical gangster film. Because of course, Al Capone, legendary figure on the Chicago underworld, the Chicago mafia, whatever, and just played so well by De Niro, who I believe he was nominated for an Academy Award supporting role. But yeah, the whole cast is great. Just a fascinating film. I've seen it so many times. So that's my number 4.
Sean Connery won an award.
Yes, he did. He did. Yep, well deserved.
Yes.
God, I can't believe he's gone, man. Jeez.
That was his big comeback.
Yeah.
That started all those 90s thrillers and action movies.
Yep.
That was De Niro's. I mean, De Niro and De Palma's first films were together with Greetings and Hi Mom. So this was a bit of a reunion for those guys, almost 20 years later.
Yeah.
And so many memorable sequences. The De Niro baseball bat sequence, incredible. Spoiler alert, but the scene how Sean Connery's final scene was incredible and shocking. And the whole staircase, which is, by the way, De Palma ripped that right off of Battleship Potemkin. It was literally, it was his homage to that classic sequence. But the Odessa stairs, yeah, but great choice though.
And funny talking about De Niro. So he, put on he was well known in the 80s for just changing his body to fit the role. I mean, a total method actor. I mean, for Raging Bull, for instance, which was done a few years before, where he played boxer Jake LaMotta. I think he put on 50 or 60 pounds to play, different eras in the life of boxer Jake LaMotta. So he's really thin and small, and then he's, he puts on all this weight and he's, huge. And he did the same thing for this. And if 1987, he did a couple other films before and after. He put on so much weight to play Al Capone and then quickly lost it for other roles where he just looked completely normal. So that was, no big deal to him. He just was
he wore silk underwear just because Capone wore silk underwear.
Gotta do it, right? Gotta look the part. Gotta all the way down to the underwear.
Got to
right?
feel the part.
Yeah.
That's it, acting.
Yeah. They don't make them like that anymore. All right, Mike, back to you.
All right, my number 3, once again, coincidentally chronological. I went from Sisters to Carrie, and now here we are in 1980, Dressed to Kill. And once again, big time Hitchcockian. I would liken it most to Psycho. I think this is kind of like De Palma's Psycho, especially spoiler alert, but losing one of the main characters, very, very early in the film, which was so shocking. Yeah, and Angie Dickinson looked so great in this. And when I was a kid, I guess I was 13 when this came out. My dad was the biggest Angie Dickinson fan in the world. I mean, he had the biggest crush on her, loved all her films. And I remember he freaked out when this came out because of the nude scenes and the sex scenes, but I don't think that's really Angie. But she really looked, she was as beautiful as it gets around this period. But I remember my dad also was also the biggest Kubrick fan. And I remember Dressed to Kill and The Shining both came out in 1980. And for my money, 2 of the best horror films of that year. But my dad hated both of them. He walked out of both of them. Loving Angie Dickinson and loving Kubrick, he hated both of those films. Wow. But I loved them. So I guess
you probably left.
You never grown to like them?
I think my dad eventually grew to like them. Maybe more to The Shining, less Dressed to Kill. But for me, I mean, The Shining is one of my all-time favorites, and this is my number 3 for De Palma, so it's a favorite as well. But the suspense in the museum sequence is unbelievable. I mean, the tracking shots, there's so much suspense, and then after Angie, her part of the movie is over, then it takes this twist and it goes into a whole nother world with all the Michael Caine stuff and all the psychiatrist stuff. And anyway, but I technically, I love so much of the technical stuff in here. And yeah, to me, De Palma that's such a big part of his style is the camera work. He is such a visual storyteller. And to me, this is him tapping into his Hitchcock side at its best, because the remaining 2 on my list are not in the Hitchcock vein. So this was, for me, for my money's worth, my favorite of his Hitchcock films.
So how is that Criterion copy you have? Because that's like, you can't get that anymore. That's like hard to
really
get. Yeah.
I mean, I'm just looking what's on here.
Mine's good too. I've got the what is it, the Shout Factory? No, it's the MGM, but which is good. But I bet you that Criterion is.
Well, this has a conversation with De Palma and Noah Baumbach, great director in his own right, who directed the De Palma documentary. But it also has interviews with Nancy Allen, the composer, the shower scene body double. It's got a 2001 documentary. So yeah, as always, the Criterion is just packed with cool stuff.
I will say Nancy Allen was pretty incredible in that film too. One of my favorite roles for her.
And it's got Keith Gordon, who eventually went on, not only playing in Christine, the lead role in Christine, Stephen King film, he also went on to be a director in his own right, and he's a major director on Dexter.
Yep.
Who played the kid, so he went into directing.
Yep. Cool. All right, Jamie.
All right. I muted myself. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I got construction going on next to me. Number 3, it's going to be Scarface. I mean, who hasn't seen this movie? We all know what it's about. Brian De Palma directed this, but I would call it an Al Pacino movie. I rewatched it, and halfway through the movie, I started to think, I don't think there's a scene in this movie that Al Pacino's not in. And I started to pay attention to the second half. And I'm pretty sure there wasn't in the first half. He just chews up. It's a character study of a guy who's crazy enough to get to the top, but too crazy to stay at the top. That's how I take it. But let's talk about the Hitchcock moment in this movie. I'm going to go back to Frenzy again, in the same shot in Frenzy. For about 3 or 4 minutes, this movie becomes a horror movie with the chainsaw part in the bathroom, in the shower. Of course, if it's going to be a Hitchcock moment, it's going to involve a shower. But before all that, before the guy gets it in the head, the camera goes out the bathroom window. Outside, you hear the birds chirping It's a nice sunny day. He goes across the street and you see Tony Montana's buddy. He's in the convertible. He's hitting on chicks.
Manolo, Stephen Bauer.
Yeah.
A beautiful day. Nobody has an idea of the horror going on 100 feet away from them. And it's kind of like the frenzy scene when the girl's getting murdered and they come out into the streets of London and nobody has any idea of the horrific things going on about 100 feet away up in the room. So there is a part in this movie, though. I know it's a 1983 movie. I know it takes place in 1983. But the rise of Tony Montana, they like it's a montage, and they're playing this song that sounds like it should be in Rocky IV.
Totally.
I keep waiting for Al Pacino to start doing one-handed push-ups. You know, it kind of, I wish that it makes it a little dated. But speaking of Rocky, the weird thing about his character is, as menacing as he is, there's a Rocky Balboa-like charm about him at the same time. Like when he's trying to woo Michelle Pfeiffer in a convertible and he puts on the goofy hat. Yeah, goofy hat. Huh? Something Rocky would do. Or even in the drug scene, the drug deal scene right before the shower, he walks in, they're not communicating well. He goes, "You want me to walk out, come back in, we start over?" It was just this weird, funny charm about him. But, and it's interesting to watch the first half of this movie, maybe the first 75% of it. Robert Loggia, who has the worst Cuban accent I ever heard. You watch him slowly become terrified of Tony, to the point where he hires assassins or gets his assassins to try and kill him. But I do believe these assassins are ex-stormtroopers because they can't aim for shit. God damn it. So yeah, and it's funny how the hip hop generation in the 90s and 2000s really gravitated towards this movie. I mean, if you sold like an ounce of weed in your life, you had a Scarface poster on your wall in your apartment. You were a drug lord wannabe. So yeah, Scarface. And I like it more and more. The first time I saw it in the 80s, I was like, every decade I see it, I like it more.
I'm sorry, Pete, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Mike, go ahead.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the chainsaw scene. I just did a podcast a few days ago. It hasn't aired yet, but it was about Quentin Tarantino films. And not only did De Palma lift that chainsaw sequence from Hitchcock, but Tarantino lifted it from De Palma, because think about the ear sequence from Reservoir Dogs. Basically, Tarantino did the same exact thing. He's Mr. Blonde is in there, hacking off the cop's ear, and then he walks out. It's the biggest horror ever. Stuck in the Middle with You is playing, and then he walks out. He has to go back out to his car to get the gasoline to light him on fire. So the camera follows him outside of the warehouse. Suddenly you're outside. You don't hear Stuck in the Middle with You anymore. You don't hear the screaming anymore. Dead silent. You hear kids playing in the streets. He opens up his car, gets the gasoline, walks back in, and then the music comes back on, and it was directly lifted out of the sequence from Scarface. So it's funny that you mentioned that.
It makes you wonder what's going on in your neighbors' houses.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Maybe you don't want to know. All right, Dan.
Hey, well, I'm glad that Jamie mentioned Scarface as a perfect segue into my film coming up. It's mentioned already. You know, it's so funny. De Palma had butted so many heads with the studio over the ratings of Scarface. They wanted to give it an X rating for violence and whatever it may be, language. And the problem is that he battled back and forth. They didn't want it to be X, because X in those days, before social media, before Twitter, before the online internet, the only way to be able to know about a film would be in printed periodicals, as in newspaper ads, and of course be shown in multitudes of theaters, because there wasn't cable at that time either. But by being rated X, many publications would not advertise the film into the newspaper, so you would never see it. And it would also be limited in certain chains of theaters. And he fought tooth, fang, and claw. They brought in, Marty Bregman, the producer, brought in psychologists to fight the MPAA. And he had done subsequently 2 cuts of the film. The original X, he took some stuff out, it was still X. The third one out, it was still X. They got it over to an R, but De Palma said, screw it, I'm sending out the first one, because if one was an X, another was an X, and this was an X, and they made it an R, that's an R2. He released the original cut. No one ever said a thing about it.
Hmm.
But that being said, he was so burned out and so angry. And once again, he's always had a defiant relationship with the studio system. He's very independent. That because of the success of Scarface, he obtained a 3-picture deal with Columbia Pictures, which he had not had a long-term contract. But on the other side of the coin, he set up for revenge. Because if you thought Scarface was bad, wait what's coming down the pike. And that brings us to Body Double. And Body Double, to me, I should say it would be my most favorite film, but Body Double is this I like to refer to as the perfect homage to Hitchcock, as Mike had said earlier. It is also, when I was talking about the separate, he loves to put reality and fantasy into films. We all know the film is fantasy, but that being said, give you an example. When you're watching Scarface, when they kill Frank Lopez's character, okay, there is a big one of those god awful in the 70s and 80s. I sublet an apartment in Manhattan in the 80s, and somebody had put one of these large photographs on the wall of the Sea of Tranquility, the moon. This was in my living room that I rented. I couldn't take it down. So people would come visit me and they say, oh, you like the moon? You want to go to the moon? No, I hate this thing. But people get these large, in Scarface is this big palm tree thing. Once again, it's a fake backdrop. When they first are working in Scarface, when they're first working in the little cantina, you see a poster, and then it pans down this little dingy Cuban greasy spoon. In Body Double, the film starts with a really cheesy backdrop, which is fake. And then he gets fired from the film. He leaves the film, or he hasn't thought he's been fired yet. He leaves the film, and there's another backdrop there they take a photo of. And that disappears. And he's saying, what's real in this film? What's fantasy? Even when Craig Wasson is driving back in Body Double, he had a carte blanche with Body Double. But why is when he's driving back to his girlfriend's house to eventually get shit on, he has a big smile on his face. And they're, of all things, they're doing one of those cheesy rear projection shots behind him. Because I think De Palma's trying to say that this is an attack on Hollywood. He's leaving the world of fakery into the world of reality. It's which in his girlfriend, he catches his girlfriend doing something. Everything is fake. The Body Double is fake. Then there's reality. There's Barney's Beanery, which is a very, simple bar type of thing. And you got houses in the Hollywood Hills. It's extremes. But what is reality is fake? Even the makeup that the killer wears, the Indian, not to give anything away, it's really not unrevealing. You can kind of figure out who it is. Even years ago, I figured out this guy looks very familiar. And he's also horribly scarred. Yeah. But there's a couple of things where he makes, aside from the Hitchcock Rear Window, aside from Vertigo with his claustrophobia, the rotoscoping shots, which I believe that rotoscoping shot when they're on the beach together, it's a photograph. It's not the real beach. So it has this facade of fakery. The whole relationship is fake. The Body Double is fake. And there's real. Everything in the film, he just attacks Hollywood, which that's why I love it. And so the film is a classic, but it's his greatest assault on the Hollywood system and how he was treated, and says, I'm going to do things on my terms. Now, he does touch upon a number of genres he likes in this film. He touches upon the giallo film, the whole tracking sequence in the mall when he's following the young lady. Okay. Now, I've never really been able to figure out, but her voice is dubbed in that film. And why is it dubbed? Is it going to be like, as in, is it a Body Double? Is he doing it as a homage to Italian cinema? Because Italian cinema and Spanish cinema are notorious for post-dubbing their audio.
Yep. And
also the Indian character. When I saw him, it reminded me of, if you've ever seen The Bird with the Crystal Plumage.
Yep, great film.
The hitman, the killer, who was Reggie Nalder at one point, who eventually went off to play Barlow in Salem's Lot on the TV series, was horribly scarred. He reminded me, this looks like Reggie Nalder. And, so he pays all these homages. Even the stepping out of it's not really the fourth wall when he's having a secondary claustrophobia attack. He all of a sudden like pictures himself back on the movie set. And like it goes into this weird dimension. He's back on the set and he gets the balls to get back in the coffin and finish the film. I like to refer to it as elegant train wreck because it is so perfectly put together. It's a perfect homage to Hitchcock, one of my favorite films by De Palma. And he pulls out all the stops with this film. And sadly enough, in his words, he said, "Yep, I was given carte blanche during the entire film." He goes, "Until they viewed my print." And he goes, and it subsequently lost him the remaining 2 films on the contract.
Oh, wow.
Because it did not do in the box office. And here it was, Columbia Pictures was owned by Pepsi-Cola or Coca-Cola Company. This is a family drink. It's a family-run state. We can't have films about sex. The last thing about the film, which I find is great, it is a perfect. Whereas Carrie is a time capsule of 1976 high school America. Okay, the sequence is a time capsule of the burgeoning growth of MTV with music videos, with having the Frankie Goes to Hollywood, and at that time, which most people might want to admit, was the burgeoning home video porn business. Because number one, not only do they have a real porn actress on the TV in the middle of the night named Lindy Shaw, advertising her new movie. In the porn business in the 80s, this is where porn actresses started becoming celebrities. People had names. It wasn't just some cheesy loop. People like Christy Canyon or Vanessa Del Rio and things like this. I know these because friends of mine told me about them. And then again, there's a lot of people in the audience tonight, okay? For a fact, and when you went into that video store, not Blockbuster, okay, I know many of you will probably say, well, I went through those saloon doors in the back because I thought that was the Western section. Yes, there's a whole new meaning of ride 'em cowboy beyond those doors, fella, but this ain't the corral you want to be in. So it's a testament to all of this in the 80s and pop culture in its finest. And he took it and he embraced it and he ran with it. On a bit of trivia on it also has, once again, it has Al Israel in it. Al Israel is the guy that played Toad, the chainsaw holding Colombian. He plays the porno director, in it. That's his second appearance. He's also in Carlito's Way as well. Yep. But the set that is used in the scene where they do the Frankie Goes to Hollywood video is the same set they use as the disco at the end of Fright Night. When he walks through the door and they go down the steps. That's from Fright Night. It was filmed a year later. But it's very much, I was in the clubs, working in the clubs and nightclubs in the 80s. I'm well aware of the culture of all this stuff. And it was just kind of weird. And, I got kind of nostalgic a lot about for it. I don't know why. But, I got nostalgic about Scarface. That's another story. But it's just, you get nostalgic about the 80s about these things. But it's a very much of an 80s time capsule. It's what is real and what is not real, what is fake, what is real in the film, and and it's just top notch, and it's top performances across the board with everybody in that film. So there you go.
Another little bit of trivia too. Barbara Crampton actually plays his wife, who he catches cheating on him at the beginning of the film. Barbara Crampton, of course, from Reanimator and From Beyond and all those.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. So.
Oh. Speaking of which, not to change the subject, but what's her name? Jennifer Salt from Sisters. She was in the famous TV movie Gargoyles.
Gargoyles, great, yeah.
And she also played John Voight's Texas girlfriend before he came to New York in Midnight Cowboy.
That's right, yeah.
And she was also on the TV show Soap back in the 70s as well.
Yes. So they've all had and I don't think he uses many. How many of it? Well, he uses Dennis Franz as the director, or Franz as the director, some of his entourage of people that he used in many films. But yeah, Body Double, I'm glad it's coming out in Criterion. I can only imagine what they're going to throw on there because everybody's still alive. They can hopefully interview everybody.
It'll be worth it.
There you go.
Cool.
Body Double.
My number 3 is Scarface. You know, I don't remember who said it. Maybe it was Mike who said that this is not a typical Brian De Palma film. And I agree with Jamie wholeheartedly that this is more a Al Pacino vehicle, right? This is an Al Pacino tour de force, and perhaps the film that started off the whole I'm Al Pacino, I have to scream and shout in every single role that I do going forward, right? Not that there's anything wrong with that, because I love when Al Pacino gets, big and loud and whatnot.
You're out of order. You're out of order.
But you look at most of the films before this that he did, he was a little bit more reserved, but everything going forward, kind of a different story. But yeah, I mean, this is got plenty of violence, over the top performance from Al. You got a very young, gorgeous Michelle Pfeiffer here. Great cast. Yeah, I don't, we've already said quite a bit about it. I dig this. It's a great kind of modern day gangster film. And again, if you've never seen it, the original Scarface from the 40s, right, Dan, or the 30s?
32. Howard Hawks.
Yeah, that's well worth checking out too. Really good. A very cool little role for Boris Karloff in that film as well.
And George Raft flipping the nickel.
That's right.
I think De Palma puts his stamp a little bit on that movie here and there. The bathtub scene, when he does a bird's eye view of the bathtub, and it's just Al Pacino and all his friends and wife, his best friend and wife is leaving him, and you get the sense this is the part of the movie where he becomes alone.
Yeah,
that's director doing that.
True.
It's a film that's grown stronger over the years.
Yeah,
I think it did well financially. It sat in a lot of critics' craws and this and that. And he also did. He did Scarface. He decided to do Scarface. He was not attached to the project originally, and it was eventually offered to him. But he did it because after he had done Dress to Kill, and after he had done Blowout, and Blowout did not do well in the theaters. Dress to Kill did okay, but he was lambasted by the critics. He goes, I'm not here just to get beat up by critics. I have to change, do something different. And that's why Scarface dropped in his lap and he said, let's try this. Yeah. He never thought it would be as big as it was, but it's a film that's grown over the years. It's probably made Universal Pictures or MCA, whoever owns the rights to everything, as in Tony Montana's face and The World Is Yours, whatever it may be, all of it has made them billions of dollars, not only in re-releasing the film, but also in merchandising.
Yeah, it's a Universal.
I bet you Dress to Kill did really good in video rental places because of horny 14-year-olds like me who saw the cover and said, I'm renting this movie.
And you weren't old enough to go through the saloon doors, Jamie.
No. Mom, you going to bed? Okay, get that video from under the couch we rented.
Absolutely. All right, Mike, you're number 2.
All right. This is the only one in my list that falls out of chronological order. We had Sisters in 73, Carrie 76, Dress to Kill in 80. And then my number 2 jumps ahead into the 90s. And speaking of Al Pacino, Carlito's Way is my number 2. As far as I'm concerned, this is almost like an unofficial, not a sequel, but it's almost like an unofficial companion to Scarface. It's a very, very similar story. It's a gangster story. It's very much a timepiece. The Carlito Brigante is very much like a Tony Montana, and I thought this movie was a freaking masterpiece. When I saw this in the theaters when it came out, I was absolutely floored by it. And the Sean Penn character, he was almost unrecognizable when he came out, like with the bald head and playing the coked out lawyer. I mean, so much of this was just so brilliantly made. The big twist at the end, like spoiler alert, the opening shot of the movie
is the end.
You're pretty much finding out exactly how this movie is about to end. But by the time you get to it 2.5 hours later, you've completely forgotten about that opening scene. And I remember when I saw in the theaters Benny Blanco from the Bronx, boom. And I was like, oh shit, I forgot all about that. Because you go on such a journey for 2 hours, 2.5 hours. there's just so much great stuff in here. I love the pool the pool table sequence in the bar, when he's in the bathroom. All of the sequences in the nightclub, which that nightclub that's set up like a big boat. You know, when the brothers are coming after him for the money, and he's hiding out, and he's going to try to hide stuff. The sequence at Grand Central Station, at the train station, when he's going up and down the escalators, and they're coming around the bend, and a lot of that was single shot stuff, no cuts. I mean, that stuff, it had to have been seriously choreographed. You know, not only was it Steadicam and it was beautifully shot, but the choreography behind that is incredible. And that's one of De Palma's things. I mean, like Snake Eyes, you know, it's not one of my favorite De Palma films, but if I had to pick out maybe one of my favorite sequences he's ever done, the opening 15 minutes or so of Snake Eyes is just so elaborate and so incredibly choreographed. But the sequence at the train station, Carlito's Way, is one of those all-time great De Palma sequences. Pacino is amazing. I think he's as great in this as he is in Scarface. And everything about this film, I absolutely love it. It's one of those films I can watch over and over and over and over again. And for my money, it's the last great film De Palma's made as well. This was 93, so here we are coming up on almost 30 years. He's made a lot of films since then, but as far as I'm concerned, this was the last great film he's made. I think he says something in his documentary about all great filmmakers make their best films in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. And he was very self-aware of it. And he was even admitting it himself, saying himself that his best films were when he was in his 30s, 40s, and 50s, which would have been the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. Yeah. And he's very, very self-aware that, you know, the films he makes now are not on that same level. And, but yeah, this for what it's worth is my number 2, Carlito's Way. Absolutely love this.
That's why Tarantino wants to retire. He said that he doesn't want to become a sucky director in his 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Yeah.
But he's still making them. I mean, like Tarantino saying he's making one more and that's it. He's done. He wants to be out after 10 films. People like De Palma or like Robert Altman went to the day he died, you know, or Woody Allen's going to go to the day he dies. You know, there's some people that will just ride it all the way out, make 50, 60 films, and it doesn't matter. They just need to make films. And I get that. There's a lot of musicians like that as well.
Scorsese's like hanging on by his fingertips.
Yeah, but Scorsese, he still makes great films. I mean, Wolf of Wall Street, I think is as good as anything. Yeah. And The Irishman. So, I mean, there are some people that can still make them that deep into their career, but it's just few of the masters that can do it.
Even Spielberg lost a little of his magic.
And see, the funny thing about you're mentioning Scorsese in this, you know, back in if there's a book out there, I think it's called Of Raging Bulls and Easy Riders. It's about that late 60s revolutionary filmmaking time in Hollywood, in which was the rise of the young Turks.
Here they are. They're all right here.
Yep. And you know, the funny thing is that De Palma and Scorsese came from New York. Lucas and Coppola were in California, and they all became friends to the point where they were just socialized together. They would show each other their films. They would critique everything, yet it was also a friendly competition. That's why, like in Scarface, for example, Spielberg came in and directed the gunfight scene at the end when the Colombians are assaulting Tony Montana's mansion. That was Spielberg as a second unit director, came in and, you know, helped him out with it. They've all worked on each other's stuff. And then, of course, while Spielberg was the 5th member that came in, he was the young kid in the group.
Can I blow your mind?
Yeah.
My dad hung with all those guys back then. My dad made a film in 67 when I was born. He made a film, and he was part of that whole circle with De Palma, Scorsese, De Niro, and he knew them all because he was in New York and he was an up-and-coming filmmaker. They all went on to become legends. My dad's film never got picked up, never got released, and he went on to another career.
Thus it was Portnoy's complaint.
But yeah, my dad also told me back then he was like Robert Downey Sr. was part of it when he made Putney Swope. But yeah, like that there's a great shot in the De Palma documentary. It's Spielberg, Lucas, Coppola, De Palma, and I guess Coppola, Spielberg, and Scorsese, and the 5 of them sitting at a table together. What a legendary photo. I mean, that's it.
They should take another portrait of that now because they're all still alive.
Yeah.
You know, and
actually, I think everybody here on this is still alive except, well, Hal Ashby and Robert Altman are gone, but the rest are still here.
No, they were. That was a wild time. That kind of saved Hollywood. Actually, saved Hollywood. No, but it's a magic time, and I think it's important that people. Well, that's why when Jamie was saying, when you were saying about how these directors that make their good films in their 30s, their 40s, or 50s, or whatever it may be, that was one of the reasons that motivated De Palma to. He said when he talks about Hitchcock, he says, yes, you could talk about his films in the 60s, The Birds, and the 70s, and so forth and so on. He goes, but his real stuff was in the 50s. That was he was known for. And he goes, and that's why when he made a lot of his films, he felt that Hitchcock had created a genre unto himself, even in any camera style, whatever. It's just a Hitchcockian, the way things are done. And that's why he employed a lot of Hitchcock type elements, voyeurism, the body double, the whole thing in his films to keep Hitchcock's legacy alive so no one would forget it. Because, I would imagine most of the people on the show, I can't really say the age bracket of people that listen to this show in particular, anything with films. But a friend of mine was recently talking to someone who is an animation professor in New York. He teaches animation on large scale history and therefore animation, and these things. And he said, out of all the classes he teaches, he took a poll. How many of you have seen The Wizard of Oz? And only 20 people out of all 7 classes knew about this.
Wow.
Had seen it. No one had seen The Wizard of Oz. So things do disappear. And that's why, like when we do this show, one of the rewarding things is that if we have 1 or 2 or 5 people out there listening to the show, or even when you do the music shows, that all of a sudden they say, I've never listened to that band. And they buy the CD or they watch the movie. You're keeping those torches lit.
Yep.
Dan, I had a 21-year-old in my kitchen about 4 weeks ago drinking a beer, and I mentioned Elton John. He never heard the name before. Never heard of it. I could have said Elton John's my neighbor. He said, guy had facial hair, drinking a beer, did not know the name. I'm afraid these people are one generation away from disappearing.
I could tell you stories about not to change subjects, but I can tell you, I had people that worked for me in my restaurant that know they love cinema, and their idea of watching cinema as reruns of Seinfeld or whatever, which is nothing wrong with that, But
there's anything wrong with that.
No, nothing wrong with it. But
No
so I
pun
sat
intended.
there and I gave each of them a film. I gave one a copy of The Wild Bunch. I gave the other one a copy of Lawrence of Arabia. I said, here's a good starting point. I want you to go home, watch the films, come back and tell me what you think. And I will teach you, young Padawan, about these things. And it's been about 4 or 5 years. They still haven't watched the film.
Oh, God.
It's kind of strange. Well, I think our society, not to get into a societal thing, but society, our attention span has dwindled and dwindled and dwindled.
Yeah,
so people don't really,
yeah.
sadly enough. So, anyhow, enough with my social commentary.
Jamie, what do you got? Number 2.
Oh, number 2. All right, we talked about this a lot. I just want to say that it's kind of like Scarface, where it's not totally De Palma-ish. Right when it starts, you see a bird's eye view of I want to say Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, getting a shave, and you see a big rug next to him, and then the text comes over the rug. It seems like you're going to watch the beginning of a Godfather movie a little bit. And there's a scene where Kevin Costner and Sean Connery are talking in a church with a big arch behind them, and the camera's a little bit below them. Looks like something Francis Ford Coppola might have framed. So he's kind of channeling those guys in this movie. We mentioned the stairs, one of my favorite scenes of all times in movies, and the Odessa steps. But I heard him say, he said it real fast, but I'm pretty sure he said it in the documentary, that he wanted to do a shootout on a train and they couldn't afford it. So he settled for the steps and almost kind of made it up as they went along. But he did say he wanted there to be no dialogue so that famous guy, composer, Ennio Morricone
Morricone
on everything.
Yeah.
So his score could breathe in it, and the gunshots just add a little bit of flair to the score. And I think it works. I think it's beautiful. I'm glad they couldn't afford the train, if that's true.
He got the train sequence in Carlito's Way, though. It's an amazing
Yes,
sequence
he did.
of them chasing through the train carts in
Right.
Carlito. So he finally got to do it.
He said it was like
years later.
almost 90 degrees, and Al Pacino had to run around with that jacket on in the subways. Oh, and the shooting scene where, we've all seen it. Sean Connery gets shot. He hated it. He hated that scene. And he actually got so much dust in his eye, he had to go to the hospital, and De Palma had to call him and talk him into coming back. So yeah, a little dust, but he got his Oscar.
He was James Bond, but he never got dust in his eyes.
Yeah, I know. Well, he never got dirt on his suit either.
Well, De Palma sat there, and De Palma sat there because they had to put squibs on him for the blood.
Yeah, there was so
and he
much.
had never had that happen. He was highly annoyed. And he goes, "You're James Bond. What? Nobody ever shot at you?"
Not you. He goes, no.
No, nobody ever shot James Bond. That's why he's still here.
Teflon Bond, man. Teflon Bond.
Yeah, but I mean, we've talked on and about it, so there's a little added thing.
Cool. That's a great
Team
film.
B.
Team B.
We talk about film. Team A just talks about how many boob shots there are. Give me Team B any day.
We're educated adults here. Okay, let's not forget that.
It's all smoke pipes.
Don't get me wrong. I like it. Great set of breasts just as much as the other guy. I like the
Yes.
fetching Ingrid Pitt and so forth and so on, but I'm good. I'm up, right?
Yep.
Get my notes here. Oh, yeah. Oh, we all talked about this one already, but anyhow, yeah, it's Blowout. Blowout is just, I saw that back in the theaters in the 80s. I've always loved it since the first time I saw it. And I was kind of disappointed when I found out it didn't do that well in the theaters. It didn't do that well, as we had said earlier, about the ending is just so heart-wrenching in the film. But it's also, at that time in 81, it was a touch upon with our political scene at that time. And it was like the Kennedy assassination, and more appropriate, and it was still in the rearview mirror of the film when they made it, was the Chappaquiddick thing with Ted Kennedy. It pretty much touched upon a lot of like touchy subjects at that point. But John Lithgow, top of his game, is playing a lunatic. Which P.S. he also played a real shitheel in the film Obsession, if you saw that one. Yeah. That was his first De Palma film. But well done. Nancy Allen looks great. The whole rotoscope with the fireworks and the whole, it builds up to a great crescendo. And it's just, and it's so funny because it's funny how it bombed was. Travolta at this point was the hottest actor in Hollywood. I mean, he had come off of Saturday Night Fever, Grease, Urban Cowboy, which was a popular theme for about 45 seconds, but it was a huge moneymaker. As a matter of fact, I was working in the clubs in New York in that time, and Urban Cowboy, I still think it was a mob hiding money situation, but was so popular that they opened a Western-themed Urban Cowboy disco in the Upper East Side of New York. That had everything from slides with hay bales going down to girls with cowboy, whatever, the whole thing, riding bulls. And it was called, this is before the national franchising, it was called Starbucks. Wow. And it lasted probably about a month. So I think it was kind of a big money laundering thing. But Travolta was really huge at this point. So for him to go into Blowout, he was going against character in this. I mean, he's playing a sound man and in making sleazy horror films, and when I saw it those years ago, I always said to myself at one point, God, he looks fat. This was 1981. And yes, he is a little bit paunchier in a very subtle way, than he was in Saturday Night Fever or the other things like this. But at that point, I was like, God, he was like a fat slob at that. He wasn't, not at all. But the film failed, unfortunately. It's always been a favorite of mine. And I think it was the first De Palma. It may have been the first De Palma they put on Criterion. And then followed by Dress to Kill. But a favorite of mine, gut-wrenching ending, and there you go, Blowout.
Two things with Blowout that you got to mention hasn't been mentioned yet is the references to Blow Up, Michelangelo's Blow Up, and the other is the similarities to Coppola's The Conversation. With Gene
Yes.
Hackman, very similar as well.
Yeah. Wow.
A lot of it's based on paranoia and voyeurism, and it's, and yeah, good stuff.
That's a good call on Conversation. Yeah, big time. Another great film.
I didn't like it when I first saw it. I got to see it again, though.
It gets better. Yeah, it's
Well,
aged very
Coppola made that between Godfather 1 and 2. I mean, he's at his peak right there, you know.
It gets lost in the big mountains. It's
does.
in the valley.
And one of the 5 from John Cazale, right? Godfather, Conversation,
Yep.
Godfather 2, Dog Day Afternoon, Deer Hunter, and that's it.
That's it.
The greatest body of work of any actor in the history of Hollywood.
Yep.
Have you ever seen? There's a documentary out about what's called Finding John. It's about John.
Yeah.
Great little documentary about him.
Great actor. Great actor. All right, my number 2 is Dress to Kill. Great thriller. I remember seeing this, when I was pretty young, and thinking to myself, "Woo! Look at Angie in the shower," and then finding out, like, not long after that wasn't her, and you watch it now and you can clearly see that it's not her, right? And it's funny so this is not the Criterion version, this is the MGM Blu-ray release. There's a documentary, an interview with her, and she talks about how, well, when Brian brought me the script and I saw that there was this nude scene, I said, wow, I don't know if I should do that, because at the time I was still a very popular actress, just coming off a Policewoman. And I'm like, well, wait a second, you did Big Bad Mama a couple of years before that, and you didn't have any issues with taking your clothes off,
Before
right?
a Policewoman, yeah, that's
right. It's
I needed a paycheck.
Yeah. You know my take on that,
Yeah.
Pete. She was 48,
Yeah.
and she just, because she does show her butt later.
Yes, absolutely.
48-year-old women, but it looks like the butt of a 48-year-old woman. So maybe she didn't want to, I'm too old for this.
Wait, before we walk away, before we move on from Angie, because Pete, you're still doing your thing. But one quick Angie story. And once again, it's with my dad. I've mentioned my dad a few times now. When he was a failed filmmaker, after that, he went to become a DJ. And I used to go on the radio with him around 1973, 74. I was a young little kid. I was only 6 or 7 years old. And he had this massive crush on Angie Dickinson. And a lot of times my dad would let me do the news or take the mic or, introduce a song. So my dad at one point says, okay, I'm going to put a piece of paper in front of you and I want you to just read it. At some point, I read the news, and then he's like, at the end of the news, I'm gonna put a piece of paper, just read it. You're not gonna know what it means, we're just saying. So I read the news and the weather, and it's gonna be 78 here in Carmel, California. And Angie Dickinson gives great head. He put that on a piece of paper in front of me as a 7-year-old kid, had me read that on the air. And I had no idea what it meant, of course. But anyway, there's my Angie Dickinson story. Back to you, Pete.
That was not very nice to him, Mike.
No, it was a classic.
Everybody's saying, he's 7. What does he know?
Yeah, exactly.
Did he know from experience?
No, he just had the biggest crush on her. He loved her.
Wow.
Anyway, sorry, Pete. I just couldn't help it.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
And this is a great film. The comparison to Psycho here, you got this beautiful star of the film who doesn't make it too far into the film. I love the whole opening sequence, the first 20 minutes of the film. It's just everything that happens makes perfect sense. I think Michael Caine is brilliant in this film. And just the way the whole thing is laid out, I think it's just such a great thriller. It, also qualifies as a really good slasher film, I think. And we've talked a bit about it. Nancy Allen is terrific in this film. And this has always been one of my favorites of his, and it still holds up really, really well. I just watched it again 2 weeks ago, and I was riveted just like the first time I saw it, way, way back when. So, that's my number 2, Dress to Kill.
It was on my list. The only thing that bothers me about that film, I think the film is flawless all the way through. If you think about it, let's call it the epilogue in the film. I just find that just so tacked on. It ends like Carrie.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I was like, you're copying your own stuff. And, not that it just kind of it threw the momentum for me in the film. But other than that, it is an excellent film. And I remember, I just talked about Body Double with her body just a few weeks ago during this Brian De Palma orgy of cinematic delights I've been living through, I threw on, what was it? I had a copy of a mini series called Pearl, which was basically a soap opera version of From Here to Eternity. And this was made in 1978. So this is 2 years for, Dress to Kill. And Angie Dickinson plays a lead role in it. And she is basically this, a rather promiscuous wife of a captain. And she's all over the place, literally dressed to kill in this film in 1940s fashions and stuff like this. So she still holds up pretty well in the way she's dressed and the way she carries herself. But I'm beginning to agree with Pete. Yeah, I think it was, I don't need the paycheck now. I have residuals. So you want to see these tatas, you got to cough up some money. I'm not,
Very well done. Yeah. I don't know. All right, here we are at number one. Mr. Portnoy, what do you got for us?
All right. It's already been talked about from everybody else, but my number one is Scarface. I just talked about Carlito's Way and how great Pacino was in that, but really this is quintessential Pacino. And, he's done Michael Corleone, he's done it all, but, this is it. And like was mentioned earlier, he's in every moment of this film. He carries this film. 3 hours. It's relentless. It's part of pop culture. To me, there's certain films that are like that. Pulp Fiction is like that. Pulp, whether or not it's your favorite Tarantino film, it's Pulp Fiction. It has to be at the top of the list. And Scarface is that kind of film. It's almost transcended Al Pacino. It's transcended Brian De Palma. It is Scarface. It is something that everybody knows. Every line is quotable. Say hello to my little friend, and it goes on and on and on. The chainsaw sequence, everything about it, all the supporting cast: Michelle Pfeiffer, Stephen Bauer, Robert Loggia. It's just all the cocaine, all the F words. I saw this in the theater when it came out in '83, and I was absolutely floored. It's one of those films, once again, if it's on cable, I can't turn it off. I have to watch it. And, the whole final sequence is so bloody and extreme, but it is, it's an absolute classic. And nobody's mentioned so far as well that it was written by Oliver Stone. This was Oliver Stone's first real big break. And so, yeah, I mean, we've kind of talked about it ad nauseum at this point, but that's my number one, really. It's just iconic. It's an iconic film that's become part of pop culture. So it has to be number one for me.
And that looks like the Steelbook edition you got there, right?
Yeah, I mean, I have several versions. I mean, my collection here is crazy, but I have like several, different versions at this point. But this is the Steelbook one.
Yeah. Cool. All right, Jamie, you're number one.
Well, guys, if you noticed, I really didn't use many props at all today.
Save the best.
He actually has Tony Montana there with him.
He has Robert Loggia.
You know what? With Hitchcock, I went nuts. Mike, I don't know if you saw it, but I actually, when I talked about Frenzy at the end, I had a bag of potatoes with a dead hand in it. I went all out. But you know what? Every time I use props, I feel like it smells of desperation, trying too hard. I'm not confident enough in my own opinion, maybe. Or maybe I'm not confident enough in the little knowledge I know, so I got to make up for it with big, stupid props. So from here on out, no more props. I'm going straight lace, baby. Just talking out my mouth, no props.
Come on, I want to see the mound of cocaine.
Oh, hell with it.
Oh!
Oh my God. Wow.
That,
oh God.
That was
Bravo.
awesome.
Oh,
Wow.
there you go. Wow, was it
Carrie is
pig
my
blood
number
or is it
one.
Caro syrup?
Is it pig blood? Wait,
It's pig's blood. I was actually going to go buy pig's feet and put it in the bucket so it comes.
oh my God.
Oh.
Wow.
Wow.
That's why I got long sleeves on. That's why I'm outside.
You know what? I just thought you were just trying to mix it up a little bit by sitting outside and
I was wondering. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Carrie.
You get those pig blood stains off the carpet.
There you go.
All the drop
Bravo.
cloths would be a dead giveaway. So
Bravo.
Now I gotta talk about this fucking movie like this.
Wow.
I can't read my notes. I don't know. It's great. Go watch it.
Wow.
Let me just say one thing about Carrie that I love.
Oh, boy.
The prom scene, you do get a sense that it's 1975. Like, oh, that's what a prom looked like in 1975. And but as Tommy and Carrie talk, there's this red haze, this red light on them. And it's kind of like a sign of things to come.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But then when Carrie gets like this and starts killing everyone, including Charlie Cheswick from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah, totally.
That's my favorite movie of all time. But that same red glow starts to, like, for me, symbolize her fury, you know? And I think that's the best split screen he ever used in that. When it slides over, it feels like she is sliding, you know, in the gymnasium. And the ending is kind of symbolic because after she crucifies her mom and there's knives in her chest, they show the scariest Jesus figure you've ever seen in your life.
Yeah.
Mm.
And it has darts in its chest, almost like she's saying, I'm killing my mother and I'm killing my belief in all of her religion at the same time. I don't know if that's what he meant, but that's how I took it. So
Yep.
there you go. Dan, be quick.
well, that's a hard act to follow.
Can I say one more thing about Carrie before we probably aren't going to talk about Carrie anymore? I'm surprised that he used the music cue from Psycho.
Yes.
Like picture,
Yes,
like
I was going to mention that.
the
Yes,
string,
Yes,
the violin stabs. I mean, that's
Twice.
obviously taken straight out of Psycho. And the moment with the pig's blood in Carrie, he uses it, which is a strange call that he got away with that.
But for a
Oh,
very
and-
brief second, it's not long.
Yeah.
Just
the scary Jesus statue. There's actually a scene in there where Jesus gets even a little bit more scary when they're arguing in the dark at the dinner table and lightning flashes, and behind them for a second is the Last Supper. In that scene, it's frightening.
Yeah, true.
So,
Yep.
there you go.
Cool
Okay.
stuff. All right.
well,
Dan.
before I go on, I'll add one more thing about Carrie. When they did film her hand coming out of the ground in the grave, I gave it away. They filmed that in reverse, just like Deliverance.
Yes, to give it
Just
an eerie.
done in reverse. Yeah, my number one film, it's been mentioned already. And the best way to describe this film, you know what I was going to say, it's as if Tony Montana and Michael Corleone had a love child, and that's Carlito's Way. What I love about this film, and Mike had covered most of these things, the sweeping steady cam shot, the storyline where the beginning is the ending. Even De Palma says he saw the film in Europe. I think he said in the documentary he did. He saw the film in Berlin after it was released here. It was released here to somewhat lukewarm reviews. They were either great or lukewarm. A lot of people were calling it Scarface light. De Palma is getting stuck in doing gangster genres because he only did Untouchables, although it was a different era. But he went to Berlin and it had a great reception, and he sat there to watch on the screen. He says, I will never make a greater film than this again. This was the epitome of his camera work, of his styles of his own, without getting into Hitchcock. You know, he really came full circle. And I think the beautiful thing of this story is that you have a character who wants to get out of the business. He's done. He's really, when he says in the beginning, you know, Your Honor, I learned all this, but he really did. And he just kept, like Michael Corleone, every time you try to get out, they pull you back in. And what makes him so much, to me, more appealing, you know, even though Al Pacino owns the screen, and it was a toss-up between Scarface and Carlito's Way with me for number one. But even though Pacino owns the screen in Scarface, he's a little over the top. Like everything is all coked out, which he is. It's a little over the top. Carlito's way, he's tired. He's an old school gangster. If you hear during the story, everybody's dead or in jail, and you got these young bucks that don't care, and he wants to get out, but he has this legendary status, and he can be tough as nails if he wants to be. Once again, another Al Israel sighting from Scarface. He plays Ronaldo, the gangster who's dressed up like he's a member of a 70s funk band sitting in front of the little coffee shop in the beginning when Al Pacino comes through to see his old friends. The other thing about it is that Alan Dershowitz, the lawyer, filed a lawsuit against the film because he felt that Sean Penn was mocking him, or he was basing his character. He may have been, who knows? I don't know. But he had a lawsuit with that. But I think it's just so great because he's just a man. He's just tired. He just wants to get out, and you see the pain on this film. And it could be very well, if he wasn't that much over the top in Scarface, he could have very well been Scarface, and Scarface lived and went to prison for 20 years and came out.
Yeah.
And there's no longer the cocaine cowboy era, and he's yesterday's news. Yep. But I think it's probably one of Pacino's greatest acting jobs. And I think it's De Palma's best film, creatively, artistically, camera work. The script is fantastic, and the whole train sequence alone and running around, it just never gives up. And then again, it's one of the few times you'll ever see Penelope Ann Miller topless.
Like people never saw her again after that, right? It's just like she just like disappeared off the face of the earth shortly thereafter.
Well, she got that part because he wanted somebody, because she's supposed to have a job in a strip club, and she was a trained dancer, so that's why she took the part. And
she was great in the film. Yeah,
no, she was excellent, and and calling him Charlie, it's like a whole other world he's in. And once again, the usage of fake backdrops or fantasy things. It starts out with that damn backlit sign in the subway of some exotic getaway, and it's also there at the end. Once again, what is reality? That's a fantasy you'll never get to. What is reality is you're dying on the platform.
Yeah.
But there's a fantasy world, and especially at the end when he envisions that it's her dancing on the beach. Whoops, spoiler. Whoops, sorry. Well, I figured everybody, if they had to have seen all of De Palma's films, except maybe Dancing in the Dark video. So it's but that's it. Yeah, mine is.
Not only was Sean Penn incredible, but got to also mention John Leguizamo as Benny Blanco from the Bronx, and Luis Guzman, as the guy is trying to get up there and hang out with Carlito, and ends up well, I don't want to give it away, but yeah, also great.
So
well, even the fellow that owns the disco, the big fat guy, I can't remember what his name was, but he was actually could not speak any word of English. He was a well-known Spanish comedian on television and film. So they cast him at it. So everything had to be done phonetically with him. And Al Pacino played hell trying to act with him because the guy didn't understand a word Al Pacino was saying. But he did all of his lines phonetically. But well done, Phil. Well done. Very New York in the 90s. Very, the Benny Blancos of the Bronx and just the Bronx in general. It's just, once again, a period piece of a time. New York City is no longer like that anymore. In small pockets, but it's disappearing. You're not seeing this.
And that was Pacino's best beard since Serpico.
Yes.
Great beard in that film. Yep, absolutely. Yep. So my number one, I can't follow Jamie with that terrific presentation. There is Carrie, probably, if not the best, one of the best Stephen King film adaptations of one of his works. I think just a terrific, chilling, creepy film with an amazing performance from Sissy Spacek. She's so believable in the role. We've mentioned before how cool it is to see all these like budding stars appearing in this film and doing quite a good job. The score is good. The special effects are good. It comes across as we know it's not a big budget film, but it kind of comes across a little bit like that, but not in a not overt type of way. But I don't know. I just think it's really, really well done and a great film from its era. And it's my number one. It just it works as both a supernatural horror film as well as just a great kind of teen piece, right? Like we talked about before, regardless of what the era is. So that's my number one.
Fast Times at
All right.
Ridgemont High from hell.
Yeah,
Mhm.
basically, yeah. So cool. I think we covered all the great ones because like the ones I had in my honorable mentions, we've all touched on. Like I had Sisters, Blowout, Carlito's Way, and Casualties of War were my honorables. So
The Phantom of the Paradise, I like.
That is
It's such
kinda
an
neat.
oddity. That's such an oddity. That's William Finley's shining hour. Big creepy William Finley shining hour.
Very Rocky Horror Picture Show meets Ken Russell's Tommy meets Kiss meets the Phantom of the Park, you
I was
know?
going to say that. Yep. Yeah.
I watched Greetings a couple weeks ago and I barely made it through it. It's very 60s.
Yeah, the early ones are a little bit different. Yeah.
Well, the first film he did with De Niro was actually filmed in '63.
The Wedding Party.
The Wedding, right? It was not released in like '68 or '69 or something along those lines. Yeah, my honorable mentions. Well, I had Scarface on there, and I said it was a big toss-up between Carlito's Way and Scarface. And I says I had to go with Carlito's Way as far as I thought filmmaking-wise. Dressed to Kill, it was on the list, went off the list because of the epilogue, which just never made me happy about that film. It kind of felt weird. But another one I put on my honorable mention list, and the only reason I'm putting it on is the film we'll never see. People wonder, De Palma lost contact with Hollywood after he did Mission to Mars, which is a $100 million flop. And it was a constant pressure from the studios. So the next film he did, and he's never made a film in Hollywood since then. All of his films have been foreign financed. But he went out and he did The Black Dahlia. And I've always been intrigued with the Black Dahlia story. It's very much entrenched in our pop culture. It was the first national-wide, creepy, horrendous murder on the horizon. But the Black Dahlia film that he does was based on a book written by James McElroy, which is a well-done fictionalized account of the Black Dahlia. And he went out to do the Black Dahlia. And why it's on my honorable mention list is the film we'll never see. Because they had adapted McElroy's L.A. Confidential, which is a fantastic, cop drama, noir, modern noir. And that was McElroy's thing. So here it is, The Black Dahlia, which was one of his earlier books. That was a huge bestseller. And in turn, is destined to be great. It's going to be great. The reason why, if you watch The Black Dahlia, I'd read the book and I watched his film adaptation, and you're watching it and you're going, something is not right here. It's choppy. The continuity is hard to follow. And the reason being is that he had financing from outside of the country, not Hollywood. He had a 3-hour plus cut on this film. And if anybody could pull off a 2.5 hour or 3 hour film effectively on occasion, other than David Lean or maybe, David O. Selznick, De Palma can pull that off. And they cut an hour of the film out and they released it and it failed miserably. So I think that had a lot to do with possibly his relationship with Hollywood. But I wish I could see the 3-hour cut because McElroy, he did it verbatim from the beginning of the book to the end. And McElroy said, this is a fantastic adaptation of my novel. And they just butchered it. And no one knows if the footage is out there. There's been petitions to get it found and redone to be released. But I think De Palma moves on. He washes his hands and moves on. But that was one of the honorable mentions, which I call the honorable mention, that you'll never see.
The Black Dahlia is not awful. I saw.
No, it's not awful, but it's.
I was kind of like, it's okay.
There's just something. There's a lot missing in it. Once again, but William Finley plays that creepy psychopathic killer. Jesus, I didn't get.
The Black Dahlia reminds me of the old movie, The Big Sleep. It looks good, but I don't know what the fuck's going on.
Exactly.
It looks good.
Actually, they covered the Black Dahlia in a stranger sort of way, but I think people don't like this film. I do it, called True Confessions with Robert Duvall and Robert De Niro.
Yeah.
They touch upon the Black Dahlia. I think that's a well done film.
I like that a lot. Yeah, actually. Well, you know what it is, because it's got De Niro playing totally against typecast, right? He's
playing a priest. Yeah.
Yeah, which is a little on the weird side, but yeah, but a good film nonetheless.
But that's my honorable mentions.
The talking about it looks good, but what the fuck is going on? I think that's De Palma's last 4 or 5 films, to be honest. Like Passion, Black Dahlia, Femme Fatale. They all kind of look good. You could see the De Palma style, but I find myself halfway through just completely lost. Even Snake Eyes was a little bit like that. So yeah, I think that's the way he's kind of been with his films for the last 20 years or so.
Yeah, good point.
I think he's just like going to the gym and he's working out. He's not really trying to blaze any new territory. I think he's well aware that his high point was at a certain time.
Yeah.
And I think he does it because he loves film and cinema.
Make a bad movie, but let me understand what the hell's going on at least.
Right.
Not too much to ask.
Yeah. I saw Domino, which is the 2019 film he did.
I didn't even make it through it, to be honest.
I couldn't. I was watching it. The only thing I really remember about it is the guy who played Jamie Stark. Was it? No, he played. He played Jamie Stark in Game of Thrones. I can never pronounce his name. I'm afraid I'll do bad justice to his name because I can't pronounce.
Very good actor, that guy.
Yeah.
Very good actor. Yes. Well, that's the interesting about. Funny you mentioned Carlito's Way. Viggo Mortensen playing Lalin. The guy who's like, man, I shit myself, man. I can't do anything.
Yeah.
I'm like I'm nothing.
Lalin.
Lalin.
I think I have an honorable mention. I don't think it's been mentioned. My honorable mentions, I mean, we talked about Blowout, and we talked about Body Double, which I have on Laserdisc. But did anybody mention Raising Cain? I don't think that's been mentioned.
No, it has not.
This is God, the glare is horrible. This is I thought this was really good. I thought this was a good return to Hitchcock land for him. After he did Untouchables and Bonfire of the Vanities, but this was kind of like a return to Hitchcock land. And I thought John Lithgow was great in this, and there was some really great jump scares in this. I remember one scene with the baby monitor that scared the shit out of me. And also the very last shot of the movie where you see the mother and the daughter and she bends down and John Lithgow's right behind her. So there's some creepy stuff in here. I mean, this was more Hitchcock stuff. And also I realized that we never mentioned talking about Sisters, that Bernard Herrmann actually scored that film, which was, Bernard Herrmann was synonymous with Hitchcock. And I think he did Sisters and Obsession as well. Before he passed away. I think the last film he did was Scorsese's Taxi Driver, but he had just done Obsession and Sisters. So it was cool that De Palma got to work with Bernard Herrmann before he passed.
Actually, that's probably like a dream come true for him.
Yeah. Sure.
Well, he apparently, when he was editing, when he was working on like post-production, but before scoring the film, he was playing Bernard Herrmann cues as he was editing the film from other films. And somebody said, why don't you get Bernard Herrmann to score it? So he contacted him, and he was like semi-retired or whatever it was. And he sent him a copy of the script, and he goes, yeah, I'll do it. And that's how he got Bernard Herrmann to actually do the thing. And Bernard Herrmann also did the score, strangely enough, for Larry Cohen's It's Alive, or horror film. Yeah. And speaking of which, Larry Cohen was the scriptwriter on one of De Palma's films. The infamous Larry Cohen. Brings Q, the Quetzalcoatl, the Flying Serpent, and The Stuff, and It's Alive, the trilogy.
Great. I love The Stuff.
And Return to Salem's Lot, that classic. With Andrew Duggan, gave him something to do. Yeah, it's
Mike mentioned Taxi Driver before. For anybody who's interested, that is going to be released on 4K, I believe, in October or something like that. So
they may take out too much of that 70s New York dirt on that one. It may clean up too much.
That's one of those films I have in every format. I have it on Beta, VHS, Laser. I have the Criterion. That was one of the first Laserdiscs I ever bought, was the Criterion Taxi Driver, because it had a commentary with Scorsese. And that was like the first time I've ever heard of a commentary. So I think I bought a Laserdisc player just for that.
Just to have that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had Taxi Driver on almost every format. It's
the place that they used to, because I was living in New York at the time. And not during Taxi, but in the late 70s, going into the 80s and 90s. And the place where Travis would meet Peter Boyle's character, have coffee, it was called Disco Donut. And it was in business up and through like the late 90s.
Coffee and Alka-Seltzer.
Yeah, coffee and Alka-Seltzer. But it was there, just like it was a little like Greasy Spoon coffee shop that was called Disco Donut. They called it Disco Donut, and because of the disco era.
And then Chockfull and Nuts is where De Niro and Jodie Foster have coffee together.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mike, do they still exist? I used to go to those every now and then, like if I was in the city for
I
like.
don't think they do. Most are
Yeah.
gone. They
God,
got
they were-
priced out.
I mean, if now Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks, they probably don't stand a chance.
Yeah, but not that long ago, there were still chock full of nuts. I mean, we're probably talking 15 years ago.
Hey, date nut bread with cream cheese and a cup of coffee.
Hey.
That was one of their specialties.
All right, when are we going to count down Scorsese? It is the Monsters. It could be Monsters Den presents Martin Scorsese.
If you do Scorsese, please count me in. I would love to do that. But
Well-
talk about a body of work. That would be a 5-hour episode.
I know, right?
Well, we've already lived through a 2.5 one. Jamie has learned to sit down so he doesn't look like he's in pain. You know,
He does look like he needs a shower, though. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Need to
I
be
gotta-
showered,
Desperately
guys.
waiting for this episode to end so he can get the
You
hell
know
out
what?
of those clothes.
if you want to have a great ending, why don't you
I
just
should go
turn the
running
lawn
down
spring-
the street of my neighborhood right now.
Why don't you just turn the lawn sprinkler on and run around?
Too bad you don't have like one of those fake knives. You could like put it in your shirt or something.
Don't
like
give
that, run down the
don't give him any ideas. Jesus
Go ring
Christ,
the doorbell to my
please,
neighbors.
please.
There you have it, everybody. Thanks for watching. In the comments below, please rank your top 5 favorite Brian De Palma films. Remember, there's no right or wrong answer. I want to thank Mike Portnoy for joining us here today. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me.
Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, of course, we're on YouTube all the damn time. Mike, you want to give any updates on live shows, new releases? I mean, we got Neil Morse band album coming out like relatively soon, right?
Yeah, Neil Morse Band album coming out next month, and that tour starts in October. Tour! I can't wait. And just started work on a new Winery Dogs album, so we're finally back together and making that happen. And that's it for now. I'm here to talk about movies.
Yeah, that is true.
Could I give a plug?
Yes.
Bud, going back on the Monsters Den, and you have me doing all this crazy research and all these things has been great. I've decided to reactivate a Facebook page I have, which is called Cheese Whiz Theater, and it's dedicated to homage to pop culture. So I'll cover anything from the Zatoichi film series to the saga of Great Shakes, milkshakes from the 60s, to yes, Chevy Chase wasn't a rock band type of thing, just weird stuff, and a lot of movies and films. So it's an exercise in a number of things for me. So if anyone wants to catch it and check it out, it's called Cheese Whiz Theater, but it's CheezeWiz Theater.
Invite me.
What's that?
Send an
I'll
invite.
invite you. Yeah. And so I have to start writing about just oddball pop culture and obscure horror, like real obscure stuff and so forth and so on. So I just started reactivating that. So I'll start publishing out a few things.
Awesome. So everybody look for that on Facebook. Just they got to join or like it or all the
Like it, join, all that.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Right.
Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you again real soon. Tomorrow morning, Martin Popoff and I back at the Funhouse. We're going to talk about those albums before the big one. So that's coming up tomorrow morning. Stay tuned for the Hudson Valley Squares on Monday, Tuesday in the Prague Seat, Wednesday, What's Hot with Sea Tranquility Day, and then the Monsters Den once again next Thursday. For Dan Brown, Jamie Laszlo, Mike Portnoy, I am Pete Pardo. Thanks for watching. We'll see you here on Sea Tranquility because, of course, we're here all the damn time. Take care, everybody. Have a good night.